Hey kid, you lost. Court's that way if you're here to clean up. Janitor's entrance is around the back. The voice was condescending, dripping with that casual disrespect reserved for someone society had already labeled. Officer Briggs didn't even look up from his coffee as he waved the young black teen away, not bothering to fully register who he was speaking to. But 18-year-old Isaiah Carter stood his ground, adjusting the slim navy blue suit that fit his lean frame perfectly. He had a briefcase in one hand, a case file tucked under his arm, and nerves churning in his chest, but none of it showed on his face. He gave the officer a slow glance. "I'm here for the 9-0 hearing in courtroom 3, Isaiah said calmly. Briggs raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "You're what? A witness. Someone's little brother playing dress-up. Kid, we don't have time for jokes. Go wait in the lobby." At that moment, Officer Ramirez, another cop lounging by the security checkpoint, joined in with a snort. "I bet he's trying to go viral. TikTok prank or something, yo. You gonna pretend to be the judge too?" They laughed together, loud enough to draw a glance from a passing court clerk. Isaiah remained quiet, standing tall, hands steady, eyes calm. Then he pulled out his badge, an official judiciary ID, marked with his full name, seal, and title. Judge Isaiah Carter, Juvenile Division. Appointed by Governor Laura Jensen under Article the 9th. Emergency provision. I'm presiding over the State via Mendoza case today. The room fell into silence like someone had shut off the air. Briggs froze mid-sip. Ramirez's grin disappeared. Isaiah continued, voice unwavering. "Now, if you're finished laughing, I'd appreciate being shown to my courtroom." No one moved. A woman behind the desk, Gloria, one of the veteran clerks, stood up abruptly. "Judge Carter, I'll escort you," she said quickly, shooting daggers at the two officers with her eyes as she stepped around the counter. "I'm so sorry about this. Right this way." As Isaiah walked with her through the marble halls, the laughter echoing behind him like a ghost. He kept his posture firm, though inside something simmered. He had dealt with this since he was 12, the raised eyebrows, the sarcastic remarks, the disbelief. But this morning had been something else, and he knew. From the minute he took the bench, he'd have to prove more than his qualifications. "Thank you," he said quietly to Gloria. She smiled. "They'll learn. Everyone will, soon enough." He entered courtroom 3. It smelled like wood polish and paper. The attorneys were already seated. A mother sat near the back with her son, nervous, clutching the boy's hand, probably expecting some aging white man to pass judgment. All heads turned as Isaiah walked to the bench, placed down his briefcase, and sat. The bailiff, an older man named Reggie, looked confused for a second before recognition sparked. "All rise," he announced slowly, still trying to wrap his mind around the sight in front of him. Isaiah's voice rang through the room with quiet authority. "This court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Isaiah Carter presiding." No one dared laugh now. 6 hours earlier, Isaiah stood in front of his mirror, straightening his tie. His mother, Darlene Carter, hovered nervously in the hallway. "You sure about this, baby?" she asked, hands wringing. "You know how they look at us. You know what they'll say." Isaiah gave her a warm smile. "That's why I have to show up, Mom. That's why I have to sit in that chair." She walked over, placing a hand on his cheek. "You're your father's son. He would have been so proud." Isaiah nodded. His father, Judge Darnell Carter, had died in a car accident when Isaiah was 10. But his memory had shaped every step Isaiah took. By 12, Isaiah had finished high school. By 15, he completed an accelerated law program designed for exceptional youth. He was a prodigy, but even prodigies weren't immune to judgment. At 16, he'd argued before the state Supreme Court. At 17, he earned the governor's trust after exposing a corruption scandal involving juvenile detention kickbacks. And now, at 18, he was the youngest judge in the country. But none of that mattered to people like Officer Briggs. To them, he was still the black kid in a suit. Back in court, Isaiah reviewed the case. A 15-year-old, Marcus Mendoza, accused of shoplifting, first offense. The prosecutor, a young white woman named Hannah Green, seemed tense. She kept glancing at Isaiah, unsure how to approach him. The defense attorney, Marvin Wells, older, with graying temples, simply offered a respectful nod. Isaiah looked up. Miss Green, proceed. Hannah cleared her throat. Your Honor, the state believes the evidence clearly shows intent. The defendant was caught on video taking items and attempting to flee. We ask for a sentence in juvenile custody, minimum 90 days. Isaiah looked at Marcus. The boy stared at the floor. Small, skinny, scared. Mr. Wells, Isaiah asked. Yes, Your Honor, Wells replied, standing. Marcus comes from a broken household. No prior record. He's barely surviving. He took food, not PlayStations, not phones, bread, peanut butter, things to live on. Isaiah leaned forward. Marcus, look at me. The boy's eyes rose slowly. Did you take those things? Isaiah asked gently. Yes, sir, Marcus said, voice barely above a whisper. Why? My little sister was hungry. I tried to ask for help, but we got no one. Silence settled like dust. Isaiah looked back at Hannah. Do you believe Marcus deserves to be locked away for this? I follow the law, Your Honor. Law isn't blind. Miss Green, it sees through us. It sees where we choose compassion and where we don't. He turned back to Marcus. I hereby sentence you to 6 months community service at the food bank. You'll also attend school every day. And Mr. Wells will check in weekly. You finish that, your record will be sealed. Understood. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. His mother wept softly in the back row. As the room began to empty, a voice interrupted. Harsh, disbelieving. This is outrageous. You're letting a criminal walk. It was Officer Briggs, standing in the back of the courtroom. His face was red. Isaiah didn't flinch. Do you have something to say? Officer, you're soft. This kid's gonna offend again. You're just trying to play hero. Maybe if you'd actually paid your dues like the rest of us. The courtroom froze. Gasps. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Isaiah slowly stood, calm as ever. Officer Briggs approached the bench. Briggs hesitated. That's an order. He walked down the aisle, defiance in his steps. Isaiah looked him dead in the eye. You humiliated me this morning, laughed at me, assumed I was a janitor. I didn't know. You didn't care. Silence again. Isaiah leaned forward. You want to talk about paying dues? I spent my entire childhood proving I deserved a seat in this system that was never built for me. I studied every night while kids partied. I sat alone at every award ceremony, knowing some parents wouldn't shake my hand. I passed the bar while most were learning to drive. So don't stand there and tell me about dues. Briggs said nothing. Isaiah continued, From now on, I expect every officer in this building to treat everyone with dignity. Especially kids like Marcus. You don't get to laugh anymore. Briggs looked away. Yes, Your Honor. Later that evening, Governor Laura Jensen gave a press conference. Behind her stood Isaiah, in his suit, eyes steady, chin high. The justice system needs change, the governor declared, and Judge Isaiah Carter represents that change, not because he's young, not because he's brilliant, but because he never forgot who the law should serve. Reporters asked questions. Flashbulbs popped. That night, back home, Isaiah removed his suit, placed his badge on the table, and sat with his mother in silence. She looked at him. You did good. He nodded. Still more to do. She smiled. Then let's keep going. And somewhere, in a police locker room, Officer Briggs stared at the TV screen playing the press conference. The words, youngest judge in America, glowing beneath Isaiah's image. He turned off the TV and sat in silence. For the first time in years, he didn't laugh. The next morning, Isaiah stepped into the courthouse lobby again. This time, the reaction was very different. The moment he entered, conversations halted. Clerks stood a little straighter. Security officers nodded quickly, not daring to delay or question him. Officer Ramirez gave a sheepish half-wave, looking anywhere but directly into Isaiah's eyes. Briggs wasn't even on duty. Rumor had it. He requested reassignment to another district quietly, without protest. Isaiah walked through like he belonged, because now no one could deny that he did. Upstairs, courtroom 3 awaited. The docket was full today, cases ranging from truancy to a heated custody battle involving two young parents barely out of their teens. As Isaiah reviewed the files, Reggie knocked lightly on the judge's door and entered. "Morning, Your Honor," the old bailiff said, his deep voice gravelly from years of calling court to order. "You made an impression yesterday." "Phone's been ringing off the hook." Isaiah glanced up. "Good or bad? Bit of both." Reggie grinned. "One side of town thinks you're a hero. Other side thinks you're a headline. But that's what change looks like." Isaiah gave a faint smile. "Let them talk." Reggie hesitated, then said, "You ever get tired of all this pressure?" Isaiah paused. "Every day. But it's not about me. It's about kids like Marcus. Kids like I used to be. If I don't sit here, who will?" Reggie nodded solemnly. "Then let's make some justice happen." The door opened, and the first case began. By midday, the courtroom was full. Word had spread. The young black judge who had gone viral for putting a disrespectful cop in his place was presiding today. Some people came just to watch. Others brought their kids, whispering, "That's him." As Isaiah entered, the afternoon case was a complicated one. 15-year-old Jameer, charged with assaulting another student. The boy's knuckles were still bruised. His mother sat beside him, arms crossed, anger simmering just beneath her skin. The prosecutor was aggressive, and the public defender, fresh-faced and overwhelmed, fumbled her notes. Isaiah watched carefully. He saw the prosecutor paint Jameer as violent, reckless, dangerous. He turned to Jameer. "Did you hit that student?" Jameer scowled. "He called my sister names. Said stuff about my dad being locked up. He spat on me first." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Did anyone see that?" "No one says nothing. Teachers don't care." The prosecutor jumped in. "Your Honor, we can't condone violence." Isaiah held up a hand. "We also can't ignore provocation, especially racial." The room went quiet again. "Miss Adams," Isaiah said, addressing the defense attorney, "I want to see if your client is open to restorative justice. Jameer, would you be willing to sit in a circle with the other student and a counselor, not to excuse what happened, but to explain, understand, and work it out?" Jameer looked surprised. "For real. Real as it gets." A few moments passed before he nodded. "Yeah, I'll do that." Isaiah smiled slightly. "Good. Case continued pending resolution. Let's solve this the right way." As court adjourned for lunch, a man in a crisp suit approached Isaiah outside his chambers. Tall, white, with silver hair and a sharp gaze. Judge Malcolm Fields, a senior jurist known for his old-school style and strong opinions. "Judge Carter," Fields said, extending a hand. "May I have a word?" Isaiah took the hand, firm but cautious. "Of course." They stepped inside the chambers, door closing softly behind them. "I've been on this bench 40 years, Fields began, "and I've seen a lot come and go. Reformers, crusaders, politicians with gavels." Isaiah listened, expression unreadable. "But yesterday, that was something new." Fields paused, letting the silence hang. "You have their attention. That's a gift and a burden. People will try to discredit you, not because of your rulings, but because you exist." Isaiah folded his hands. "I know, but I didn't come here to be liked." "Good," Fields said, "because you won't be. Not always. But I watched your hearing yesterday, and your restraint with that officer. That was surgical." Isaiah's gaze didn't waver. "He humiliated me. I wanted to respond in kind. But then I thought of Marcus and all the kids watching. If I lost control, what message would I send?" Fields nodded, thoughtful. "There may be hope for this place yet." And with that, the older judge left no further praise, no dismissal, just a quiet acknowledgement between two men who wore the same robe, but walked very different paths to get there. That night, Isaiah was invited to speak at Jefferson High School. The auditorium was packed, teachers, students, Even a few press members gathered, buzzing with curiosity. He walked on stage, no notes, no teleprompter, just himself. When I was 13, he began, I got stopped by police outside a store near my house. They said I looked suspicious. I was carrying a textbook. Murmurs swept the room. They searched me. Didn't find anything. Didn't apologize either. I walked home wondering what I'd done wrong. The answer, nothing. He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. That was the moment I decided to study law, not to escape the system, but to change it. He told them about law school, about how professors doubted him, how courtrooms laughed, how even now, in this very city, people didn't believe until he sat behind the bench. You don't have to be old to be wise. You don't have to be white to be just. You don't have to be rich to make change. You just have to be brave. A standing ovation followed, but more than the clapping, it was the tears in the eyes of black parents, the wide-eyed stares from black boys in hoodies, the quiet hope blooming in the rows of students that mattered to him. Back at the courthouse the next day, Isaiah was met by Officer Ramirez. Your Honor, he said quietly, I wanted to apologize. About the first day, I was wrong. Isaiah studied him. Thank you for saying that. Ramirez cleared his throat. There's a program starting, mentorship between officers and at-risk youth. Would you consider partnering with us? Isaiah blinked in surprise. You're serious? Ramirez nodded. I saw what you did with Marcus. It made me think. Maybe we need judges like you more than we thought. Isaiah smiled. Send me the proposal. I'm in. Weeks passed. The stories kept spreading. Isaiah ruled with compassion, with firmness, with fairness. He overturned a wrongful detention policy. He instituted peer mediation. He took on cases most judges avoided. But more than that, he changed the culture. By the end of the month, the same courtroom that once snickered when he walked in now stood in quiet respect. Even Officer Briggs returned silent, subdued, never once challenging him again. He now escorted kids gently into the building, and once, Isaiah saw him reading a book from the community library rack, a biography of Thurgood Marshall. The last case of the term was a surprise. As Isaiah opened the folder, he froze. State versus Michael Carter, his cousin, same age, same blood, different path. Michael had been arrested for drug possession. His file was a mess school, suspensions, probation, missed hearings. Isaiah's heart clenched. The courtroom was full that day, but he didn't let it show. As Michael was brought in, his eyes widened in shock. Ice, he whispered. Man, I didn't even know. Isaiah stared at him from the bench. This is a court of law. You will address me as Judge Carter. Michael lowered his gaze. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecutor asked for sentencing. Isaiah listened, then dismissed her. Michael, he said, I can't treat you different, but I won't throw you away either. He paused. You've got two choices. Serve time or enroll in the Youth Justice Initiative. Full compliance. Counseling, dance school, community hours. Michael swallowed. You really think I can do that? Isaiah's voice cracked slightly. I know you can. After court, Isaiah sat alone, staring at the gavel in his hand, the same gavel his father once used. He remembered being 10, standing in the same chamber, watching his father rule from the bench. He never imagined he'd sit in that chair so soon. So young, so judged himself. But now, he knew he belonged, and the world knew too, because they could laugh all they wanted at the black teen in a suit. But now, they stood when he entered and called him, Your Honor. 3 weeks later, Isaiah stood on the steps of City Hall, the spring sun casting long shadows across the stone. The city had gathered more than he expected. Media vans were parked around the corner. Students from Jefferson High lined the sidewalk with handmade signs that read, Justice looks like us, and Judge Carter gave me hope. Even former defendants came, standing quietly among the crowd. He wasn't here to judge today. He was here to speak. The mayor stepped up first, offering the usual platitudes about progress, reform, and youth empowerment. Then the governor took the microphone, recounting Isaiah's unprecedented rise, her decision to appoint him, and the criticism she faced for it. But today, she said proudly, there is no more doubt. When Isaiah finally stepped to the podium, the applause that greeted him was thunderous and emotional. Some clapped, others cried, but all of them looked at him the same way, like he had rewritten something in their minds about what power, poise, and purpose could look like. He looked out over them all and began. 3 months ago, I walked into a courthouse and was mistaken for a janitor. A week later, someone asked me if I was the judge's intern. Just yesterday, someone emailed to ask if I was a diversity hire. He let that settle. The truth is, my story doesn't begin with robes and gavels. It starts in a neighborhood where sirens were more common than lullabies. It starts with watching my father, Judge Darnell Carter, work 12-hour days to fight for justice, and still find time to read me bedtime stories. He looked down at his hands for a moment. I grew up fast, not because I wanted to, but because the world made me. I was told to work twice as hard to be seen as half as worthy. And I did, but the thing that fueled me wasn't anger. It was love. He scanned the crowd. Love for my people. Love for the law. Love for those still trapped in systems that were never meant to serve them. I sit on that bench, not to punish, but to listen. Not to condemn, but to correct. Because the law, at its best, is not just rules, it's restoration. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. I've seen kids walk into my courtroom scared, angry, hurt. I've seen officers learning to unlearn. I've seen hope bloom where shame once lived. And I know this, change isn't fast, and it isn't easy, but it's possible. Because I'm standing here. He raised his chin. So, to every black boy who's ever been told he couldn't be more than what they see, wear the suit, sit at the table, take the bench, and when they laugh, let them. Because one day, they'll rise when you enter the room. The eruption of cheers nearly drowned out the sound of Isaiah stepping away from the podium. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But he didn't need to say another word. The message had landed. Back at the courthouse, something unexpected happened. A young officer rookie, barely 23, white, freckles scattered across his nose, approached Isaiah in the hallway. He looked nervous. Judge Carter. Isaiah turned, nodding. I read about what happened with Officer Briggs. I wasn't sure what to think. But then I saw your interview last night. My brother's in juvie right now. And you made me realize maybe I can be part of fixing this. I signed up for the youth mentorship. Thanks for giving me a reason. Isaiah smiled. Thank you for being brave enough to try. As the young man walked off, Isaiah stood alone, surrounded by silence and marble. He remembered his first day, how small he felt walking through that same hallway, the echoes of laughter behind him. Now, it echoed differently. It was respect. Weeks turned into months. Isaiah presided over dozens of cases, many of them involving kids of color, poor kids, foster system kids, kids who looked like him. And he never once forgot how they saw him, not as a symbol, but as proof. He got letters from mothers who said he saved their sons, from kids who said they wanted to study law, from a girl in Easton who wrote, I thought judges were scary, but now I think maybe I could be one too. Some days were hard. He faced criticism from old judges who called him too emotional, too lenient. He got hate mail. A few cable hosts mocked him. Baby judge. One headline read. But every morning, Isaiah rose, tied his tie, and walked into that courthouse like it was built for him. Because now it was. One rainy Thursday afternoon, he got a call. His cousin Michael had completed his entire community program, school, counseling, volunteering, and he wanted to speak to Isaiah. They met at a quiet diner on 4th Street, no cameras, no court reporters, just two cousins, two boys from the same block who had taken two roads. You saved me, man, Michael said, eyes red. No one ever gave me a second chance before. Isaiah sipped his coffee. You saved yourself. I just opened the door. Michael laughed. Still, you made me believe I could walk through it. They talked for hours, and as they left, Isaiah slipped an envelope into Michael's hand. Inside was a letter of recommendation for a youth mentorship job at the courthouse. I want them to see what a second chance looks like, Isaiah said. The last moment came a year later. The courthouse held a ceremony. Judge Isaiah Carter was named Youth Justice Innovator of the Year by the National Bar Association. As he walked onto the stage, he spotted someone near the back, Officer Briggs, in uniform, hands folded in front of him. Their eyes met. Briggs gave a small, respectful nod. Isaiah nodded back. And for the first time since that humiliating morning, they saw each other not as adversaries, but as men. Change had come. It started with laughter, but it ended with respect. 2 years later, the city had changed. The courthouse had become a place not just of justice, but of transformation, thanks to Isaiah Carter. The juvenile division had implemented a revolutionary youth-centered program that had cut reoffending rates by more than 60%. Community circles were now standard practice for nonviolent youth offenses. Schools coordinated with judges to intervene before kids even got booked. And most importantly, kids weren't just getting punished, they were getting heard. Judge Isaiah Carter, now 20, still the youngest on record, had become a national symbol. He had declined multiple book deals, refused to run for office despite intense pressure. My seat is on the bench, he always said, not on a stage. But even with national recognition, he stayed rooted. Every week, he still returned to the neighborhood barber shop where he used to sweep the floor. He walked into corner stores where the owners knew his name. Kids waved at him from their porches, shouting, "Hey, Judge," with the kind of awe once reserved for rappers or athletes. One afternoon, after presiding over a particularly emotional case involving a runaway teen who'd been in 6 foster homes, Isaiah sat in his chambers staring at the wall. He'd sentenced the boy to a 6-month residential recovery program with mental health support and weekly therapy. But it didn't feel like enough. Something gnawed at him. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," he said. It was Gloria, the clerk who had walked him to the courtroom on his very first day. She was older now, moving a little slower, but her eyes still had fire. "There's someone here to see you," she said, voice careful. "Another reporter?" "No. It's your father's old clerk, Ronald." Isaiah's heart skipped. He hadn't heard that name in years. Ronald stepped in gray suit, worn briefcase, still clutching a folder of papers like he'd never retired. His hair was white now, his face lined with time, but his voice still solid. "Your Honor," Ronald said with a nod. "Ronald, please," Isaiah said, standing. "Sit. What brings you here?" Ronald lowered himself into the chair slowly. Then, from his briefcase, he pulled out an old leather-bound journal. "Your father's." Isaiah's breath caught. He kept this during his first 10 years on the bench, before the accident. "I thought you should have it." Hands trembling. Isaiah took it. He turned to the first page. Written in neat, bold script, "The law will not fix everything. But the way you carry the law, that just might." Isaiah swallowed hard. "He used to read that line out loud every Monday," Ronald said, smiling. "And now, you're living it." Tears welled in Isaiah's eyes, but he didn't blink them away. He let them fall. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, he stayed late in his chambers, reading every word of his father's journal, every case, every fear, every doubt. It was all there, raw, human, brave. And on the final page, written just days before the crash that ended Darnell Carter's life, was a letter. "To my son, if he ever reads this." Isaiah held his breath and read, "Isaiah, if you ever sit where I sit, know this. They will doubt you before you open your mouth. They will try to laugh you out of the room. But don't fight to be feared. Fight to be just. Fight to be true. And never forget, your voice can be the one that breaks the cycle." Isaiah closed the journal, hands shaking. Outside, the courthouse was silent. The city slept, but his soul burned brighter than ever. The next morning, he came in early. He met with school boards, community leaders, and former juvenile offenders. He proposed an idea that had lived in his mind for months: the Carter Initiative, a pipeline from courtroom to college, internships, scholarships, therapy, mentorship, life training, real opportunities, not just empty talk. Within 3 months, the initiative was funded first by local donors, then by statewide support. Even celebrities started backing it. Kids who had once sat in his courtroom in shackles were now giving speeches about redemption, writing essays, starting businesses. And in one particular case, Marcus Mendoza, now 18, had returned to the courthouse, not in cuffs, but in a suit. He was applying to be Isaiah's clerk. Isaiah reviewed the file, smiled, and called him in. "Remember me, Your Honor." Marcus grinned. "I remember a scared kid stealing peanut butter," Isaiah said. "And I remember a judge who saw more in me than I saw in myself," Marcus replied. "You ready for this?" "More than anything." Isaiah stood and shook his hand. "Welcome aboard." 2 years later, the courthouse hosted a special celebration. A plaque was unveiled in the lobby, the Carter Bench, dedicated to generations of justice. Officer Ramirez was there, now a lead trainer in racial equity workshops. So was Michael, Isaiah's cousin, now managing the youth re-entry program. Briggs showed up too, in a quiet corner of the crowd. He didn't speak, didn't approach, but he clapped loudly, proudly, as the ceremony closed. A reporter from 60 Minutes approached Isaiah. "Judge Carter," she said, "do you have a message for young people of color watching this moment?" Isaiah looked into the camera without hesitation. "Yes. I want you to know that your suit is not a costume. Your intelligence is not a threat. Your presence is not a mistake. The world may laugh, but when you walk in truth and lead with justice, they'll have no choice but to stand." She nodded. "And what keeps you going after everything?" He smiled. "My father's voice, my mother's strength, my community's hope, and the kids." He looked toward the group of young people behind the crowd, smiling, clapping, watching him like a star in the sky. The kids who come in broken and leave believing they're worthy of more. The camera panned to their faces, and in that moment, Isaiah Carter, once laughed at, dismissed, underestimated, became not just a judge, not just a trailblazer, but a legacy in motion. And the laughter, long gone. Now, all they could do was rise. A few more years passed. By 25, Judge Isaiah Carter had become the face of a movement, a living legend still grounded in the reality he came from. He still lived in the neighborhood he grew up in, even though he could have moved to the suburbs or bought a high-rise condo downtown. His mother still lived in the same small house with the cracked steps and the red door. And every Sunday after church, Isaiah stopped by to eat her famous gumbo and sit on the porch, waving at neighbors like nothing had changed. But everything had. Kids who once ran from police now ran for student council. Teens who used to dream of surviving the streets now dreamed of scholarships and summer internships through the Carter Initiative. Courts across the country had adopted his model. Some called it the Carter method, but he always said, "It's justice, done right." He turned down political offers again and again. They wanted him in Congress, even whispered dreams of the White House. But Isaiah always gave the same answer: real change doesn't come from speeches. It comes from decisions. And my decisions are made from the bench. One evening, he was invited to give the keynote address at the National Judicial Reform Conference in D.C. The room was filled with judges, lawmakers, academics, all of them waiting to hear from the kid they once called a fluke, a political stunt. Too young, too black, too bold. Isaiah stood tall in his simple tailored suit. No flashy gold watch, no entourage, just his words. "I was laughed at for showing up," he began, his voice calm, firm, resonant. "Laughed at because of how I looked, how young I was, and where I came from." A pause. But the real joke was believing that justice had a type, that fairness wore a certain skin or spoke with a certain tone, that empathy was weakness. He looked across the crowd, no fear in his gaze. Let me tell you what's really weak. A system that punishes pain instead of understanding it. A system that jails children for failing tests we never taught them to pass. A system that values obedience over healing, silence over truth. Now they were leaning forward in their seats. You don't have to agree with everything I do, but you can't deny the results. Kids once destined for prison now earn degrees. Parents once hopeless now serve as mentors. Officers once reactive now lead with restraint. And all it took was listening, and caring. He let that linger before ending. I stand here not to say I changed the system, but to remind you that you can. Every gavel you hold is a chance. Every sentence you pass is a mirror. The question is, what will it reflect? The entire room stood as one. Applause thundered like a wave, not just for a speech, but for a reality that had once seemed impossible. That night, Isaiah returned to his hotel, exhausted but full. As he entered the lobby, a bellhop young, black, probably 19, watched him walk by and hesitated. "Excuse me, sir," he said shyly. "You're Judge Carter, right?" Isaiah smiled. "I am." The bellhop beamed. "I read about you, watched all your speeches online. I'm studying criminal justice at Howard." Isaiah extended a hand. "Then maybe one day I'll be watching you." The young man shook it with pride. "You made me believe I could." Upstairs in his room, Isaiah stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. He thought of his father's journal, still on his nightstand back home. He thought of Marcus, now studying to be a lawyer, of Jameer, who went on to become a social worker, of Michael, now married with a child and building his own nonprofit. He thought of that first day being laughed at in the courthouse lobby, the pain of it, the rage of it, but also the fuel it gave him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Marcus, with tomorrow's case files. "Long day?" Marcus asked. Isaiah nodded. "But a good one," Marcus grinned. "You ever think about writing a book?" Isaiah smirked. "I think I'm still writing it every day, with every life we touch." Marcus nodded. "You know, they'll never laugh at you again." Isaiah looked down at the files in his hand. "Let them laugh," he said softly, "because when they do, I'll still be here, still listening, still ruling, still standing." And in the quiet hum of the hotel room, with the city stretching out beneath him, and the weight of justice on his shoulders, Isaiah Carter smiled. He had become the gavel they never saw coming, the robe they said he could never wear, the voice that turned ridicule into reverence. And now, wherever he went, the people no longer laughed. They rose.